He must go. He is a clear and present danger to the nation that we all love.
It's always been about getting the president, no matter what. It's an obsession that is now broadened.
All of this directly connected to the riot that engulfed the Capitol 1 week ago, killing 5 people, injuring dozens. President Trump had encouraged supporters to march to the Capitol. Those calling for impeachment say these words incited violence.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
But the president's supporters point to these words as evidence otherwise.
I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard.
That is the impeachment charge and question. Did the president willfully incite violence against the government of the United States? Passionate Democrats insisted today he must be held accountable.
The President of the United States instigated an attempted coup in this country. People died. Everybody should be outraged, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. If this is not an impeachable offense, I don't know what the hell is. This president is not fit to remain in office.
The president not only incited an insurrection against our government, but has in word and deed led a rebellion. For us to be able to survive as a functioning democracy, there has to be accountability. We must impeach and remove this president from the office immediately so that he cannot be a threat to our democracy.
Today's efforts came after Vice President Mike Pence sent a letter to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi last night announcing he would not invoke the 25th Amendment and strip the president of his duties, saying it would, quote, set a terrible precedent. On the House floor, the president's most ardent supporters rejected impeachment.
If we impeached every politician who gave a fiery speech to a crowd of partisans, this Capitol would be deserted. That's what the president did. That is all he did. He specifically told the crowd to protest peacefully and patriotically, and the vast majority of them did. But every movement has a lunatic fringe.
This country is hurting. The people are hurting. Our colleagues are hurting. This is a reckless impeachment. This will only bring up the hate and fire more than ever before. Have a conscience. Put the people before politics.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Unify
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Country.
But in a rare rebuke of any president, even some of his own party leaders and closest allies said he was responsible for what happened. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy.
Some say the riots were caused by Antifa. There is absolutely no evidence of that. The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding.
McCarthy stopped short of impeachment, but other Republicans, like Washington's Jamie Herrera Butler, voted to impeach.
My vote to impeach our sitting president is not a fear-based decision. I am not choosing a side, I'm choosing truth. It's the only way to defeat fear.
In all, 10 House Republicans threw their support behind impeachment. The final vote was 232 to 197. It was one of the shortest presidential impeachment debates in American history, but it was incredibly passionate, with fear and blame woven together.
Just 1 week ago, almost to the hour, I laid right there on the floor of the gallery above us. I heard gunshots in the speaker's lobby. I heard the mob pounding on the door. And what they were trying to do, they were all an angry mob incited by the president, trying to stop certification of a legitimate election. It's clear the president learned nothing in the last year.
Rather than actually helping American people in this time, we start impeachments that further divide our country. I call bullcrap when I hear the Democrats demanding unity. Sadly, they are only unified in hate.
As the debate went forward, physical reminders of what sparked it were clearly in evidence. National Guard troops lined up in front of the Capitol and sleeping inside, camping out on the marble floors of the Capitol, finding nooks next to statues as they rotate on and off duty. Lawmakers themselves faced new unprecedented security, now required to pass through metal detectors when entering the House chamber. And face masks are now mandatory under penalty of a $500 fine for violations. For his part, the president today sent out a statement urging calm. He wrote, "I urge there must be no violence, no lawbreaking, no vandalism of any kind. That is not what I stand for." Meanwhile, there were more arrests in the investigation into last week's Capitol siege. Robert Keith Packer, who was pictured wearing a Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt when he stormed the Capitol, was taken into custody this morning in Virginia. Officials now are looking toward the inauguration. And D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser said today the security operation has intensified amid fears of renewed violence.
Clearly, we are in uncharted waters, and it is very important that we work with all of our partners to secure these events and secure these parts of our city. Certainly this time last year, we didn't expect to be in this situation.
City officials said upwards of 20,000 National Guard troops will patrol the district. That's 4 times the total number of U.S. troops in Afghanistan and Iraq.
And Lisa joins me now from the Capitol. So, Lisa, you've been telling us that this was not an easy decision for many Republicans. Tell us a little bit more about the 10 who voted to impeach and why.
That's right. The vast majority of Republicans, nearly 200 of them, voted not to impeach. But let's talk about those 10 who voted to impeach. Let's look at who they were. Here is the list of those 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach the president. Now, these districts range from Liz Cheney's in Wyoming, which voted by 46 points for President Trump in 2016, to John Katko's in New York, which voted for Hillary Clinton, conservatives to moderates. What these folks have in common, Judy, from their statements today, is they feel that the president did, in fact, directly call for these attacks on the Capitol, that he is directly responsible, and that it's an impeachable offense. Now, these members also know that it is a great political risk for many of them, facing possible primary challenges from the right because of this in 2 years, but also potential personal threat to them as well. We have seen some increases in those threats here at the Capitol.
And Lisa, I want to ask you about that because, again, during the day you were reporting on the mood there at the Capitol, this sense of tension, worry about threats that have been thrown around in connection with all this.
Judy, there has been unease at the Capitol for a long time, but in the last week that has grown into straight out alarm. And while people have gotten threats throughout the Trump presidency, both sides, we have seen the number of threats, especially against Republicans, rise. I want to play a soundbite from Republican Dusty Johnson of South Dakota from the special programming we had earlier, and he spoke to you. He talked about the threats he himself is receiving just in the last 24 hours.
Just today, just this morning, one of my offices received a threat against my life, and I've received other threats against my safety. My address, a picture of my home where my family lives, was posted on kind of an anti-Dusty Facebook page. And these are
the impeachment vote, and they really did believe that a vote for impeachment was something that could put themselves and their family at personal risk. At the same time, they all took it seriously as well on a philosophical level. This was a political and personal, very difficult decision for many of them. It has been a difficult mood here today at the Capitol, sad, also some fear. But I do want to point out one bright spot. Just a few minutes ago, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi signed the article of impeachment to get it ready for the Senate. That's not the bright spot necessarily, but she signed it on, she used the podium that had been stolen from her, from the House, from her chamber, by the rioters. That was brought back, and she used it as clearly a statement that the House is back in full operation.
Yeah, really interesting and good to see that that was received, that it was returned to the Capitol. And Lisa, finally, what about the Senate? I mean, this does now go to the Senate. What do we know about what happens there?
So much to say. Many fascinating developments there, Judy. Today, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell said he is open to impeachment, but he has not decided for it yet. He also let it be known that he does not he will not sign on to a fast trial, meaning the soonest a trial could happen in the Senate is after the Senate reconvenes. That next date is January 19th, the day before inauguration. McConnell and his staff, those around him, are making it clear that he does not think it is at all conducive to governing to have impeachment go on before inauguration, that he wants to try and have a stable transition of power, and that an impeachment before President-elect Biden takes office would not be helpful to that. So it's now clear that the Senate will move forward with the trial after President-elect Biden takes office, and we know several Senate Republicans are undecided, among them Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. And another question to be resolved, there will be a debate, can you impeach a president after he has left office? There is some precedent, but there will be debate.
Seems like a lot is unclear about where this goes from here on. But Lisa Desjardins reporting on it all. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
And now we go to our Yamiche Alcindor. So Yamiche, President Trump becomes the first president in American history to be impeached twice. What do we know about how he is reacting to this?
Well, President Trump is furious at the idea that his marred legacy became even more tarnished today as he became the first president to be impeached twice. The president spent much of the day watching TV, watching the impeachment vote and debate play out on TV. The president, in some ways, was really lashing out at people because what he saw were Republicans saying that he betrayed his oath of office, of course, along with Democrats saying that he is a walking impeachment offense. The president also just, in the last few seconds, released a 5-minute video where he says that no supporter of his would be involved in any sort of violence or any sort of attacks on law enforcement. He also says, though, that he's very worried about this free speech issue, saying that there are attempts to cancel people and to try to unfairly target people for free speech. There were some defenders of the president who were talking about free speech, but I have to tell you, he is talking about a small group of people defending him, because the number of people that I talked to today, they say even if this is about free speech, they still believe that the president should not have said what he said.
And Yamiche, picking up on that, what do we know about how the president would deal with a Senate trial? As Lisa just reported, it's not clear that there will be one if it happens after he leaves office. But what are they thinking? What are they planning?
Well, I spoke to a number of legal experts today, including a lawyer for President Trump, and it's clear that he's going to have some real problems recruiting lawyers. Alan Dershowitz, who at one point was one of the lead attorneys during the first impeachment, told me that President Trump had the right to say what he said, but that it was not right for him to say what he said. There are a number of other attorneys who are not going to be part of this defense, including Jay Sekulow, the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone. Alan Dershowitz also told me he's not going to be part of this defense. The only person we think of right now who's going to be part of that defense for sure is Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal attorney, who has at times spread false information. So we have to see where this goes. The defense, though, will be about free speech. They will also be arguing that this was a political hack job and a witch hunt against the president, which is what he said today in that video that he referenced and that he released today.
Yamiche Alcindor reporting on the reaction at the White House. Yamiche, thanks so much. Now we will hear from members of Congress about how they voted in the second impeachment trial of President Trump. Joining me first is Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois. He is one of the 10 Republicans who broke from their party to vote in favor of impeachment. Congressman Kinzinger, thank you very much for joining us. Explain to us why you decided to vote for impeaching President Trump.
Well, look, this is a heavy day for America, but it's been really heavy for America prior to the election, but more importantly, after the election, when the president began using the 4 years of having developed this argument and began executing on this idea that democracy doesn't work. The election was stolen. Of course, I had predicted violence for weeks leading up to the 6th, but the 6th was the culmination, hopefully the culmination of that violence coming to here. And look, when you have the President of the United States, the Article 2 part of the Constitution, incite and send and ignite a mob to attack the Article 1 branch. That is nothing short of an insurrection. I think most people can look at that and know that the president has both built the foundation and executed the command to do it. And if that is not impeachable, I don't know what in the world is. Politics is important to a lot of people, but this is a moment that transcends politics and will be written and etched in history and in the arc of the future of this country.
Was this a hard decision for you, Congressman? I'm asking because, as you know, the majority of your Republican colleagues were saying, yes, they don't like necessarily what he said, but they don't think he's to blame for the entire mob taking over the Capitol. And in any event, he shouldn't be impeached over it.
Truthfully, it was not a hard decision. I mean, it was hard to go through with it because bottom line is you're impeaching a president a second time. It's never something that should be easily done. But I think the evidence was not something we had to go discover. It was brought right to us on the 6th. And I've been calling out conspiracy theories, particularly for the last year. And I've seen this foundation be developed. I've seen people not push back and bring light to darkness. And this was the culmination of it. It was not a difficult decision for me. I know the ramifications will be big, but that's not why I took this job, just to get reelected. I took it to make a difference, and this was absolutely important for the oath that I signed, or that I swore upon, not just as a member of Congress, but as a military member.
What do you think the ramifications will be for you?
Well, I think it remains to be seen. I think there's going to be a real reckoning in the Republican Party. You know, what brought us to this point and what's our future look like? I don't know who's going to win that, but I know I'm going to fight like hell to restore our conservative principles again and return respect to politics. So I think we'll find out. It could be an okay future, and it could be a future that, you know, I'm rejected because it's not the party I'd want to belong to anyway.
Congressman Kinzinger, I'm told we have an excerpt from President Trump's video that he has released, I guess, within the hour. I'm going to play just a little bit of it and come back to you on the other side. Let's listen.
No true supporter of mine could ever endorse political violence. No true supporter of mine could ever disrespect law enforcement or our great American flag. No true supporter of mine could ever threaten or harass their fellow Americans. If you do any of these things, you are not supporting our movement, you are attacking it, and you are attacking our country.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger, what do you make of what the president just said?
Well, it's certainly a speech that I wish would have come out during this, on the day. But I don't think this exonerates the president. All you have to do is look back at the base that was built, the lies that the election was stolen despite the evidence, the misinformation that was sent to people, many of which are close to us, that have been brainwashed to believe that this place is being run by a Satan pedophile ring like Q pushes. So I'm glad the president said what he said, given the potential for future violence. But the bottom line is he needed to be saying this a long time, and the election wasn't stolen.
What about the argument that a number of your colleagues made today that why go through with this when the president couldn't be removed from office? The Senate, we now know, is not going to take this up. At least Leader McConnell is saying won't take it up until the day before the inauguration at the soonest, at the earliest. So is it worth it, I guess, is the question, if President Trump lives out, sees out the rest of his time in office?
Well, I initially called for the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment because it was immediate. I also didn't think it was necessarily wise to bring up impeachment, but the second I knew it was going to be in front of me, I had no doubt which way I'd vote. But I do think this is sending a very strong message. Like, everything out here is a precedence. If we allowed anything like what happened, which is unthinkable, to go without the Congress making a statement and preventing Donald Trump from running again, but also coming on the record very forcefully that we respect our institutions, we respect the separation of powers. We could face this again, and every one of my colleagues out here would have lost their moral authority to ever be outraged again. And so I think it was the right thing to do. And, yeah, there'll be politics, there'll be some more heat, But I think in the long run, this is important for our country to heal and move on.
But you still have the vast majority of your Republican colleagues saying they still think there was a lot of fraud committed in this election, that it's just that there are still questions about the legitimacy of Joe Biden's win.
So it's one thing to be concerned about voter issues. It's another thing to say what is being said by these folks and some of them. I mean, look, every video that's put out as evidence is in its full context debunked. All these conspiracy theories have been debunked. And I think it is imperative and essential for the future of the Republic and the Republican Party that we tell the truth, that we take the tough position. We don't avoid the temporary pain of telling people what they don't want to hear. And instead we can avoid the long-term pain of things like an insurrection. You know, yes, does the impeachment feel rushed? Sure, the president has 7 days left, but all the evidence was there in front of us. And the bottom line is this was the right move. I wish more had joined me. And I think for every day that goes by, there's going to be more that wish they had to.
Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, who cast a very big vote today. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I am now joined by a Democratic congressman from the state of Texas. He is Joaquin Castro. He was one of the managers of this impeachment proceeding. Congressman Castro, welcome back to the NewsHour. We appreciate your joining us. You voted yes, along with every other Democrat in the House. What message do you believe your vote and the votes to impeach is sending?
Donald Trump incited a deadly insurrection against the United States government at the U.S. Capitol last week, and there have to be consequences for a president for doing that. And that's why I voted to impeach Donald Trump, and also hope that the Senate will convict him.
What you heard your Republican colleagues, other members of the House today argue time after time that this was rushed, that it didn't give the president due process, he didn't have a chance to make his own case, that the House skipped the committee and went straight to the floor and did this in just a matter of a few hours. Do you have concern that history will look back on this as a rushed impeachment?
I actually do not. I think the evidence comes from the president's own words, repeatedly telling a big lie about the election being stolen from him, when this was, by the government's own account, the most secure election that we've ever had in American history. And the president repeatedly told those lies. He incited his supporters to believe them, asked them to come march to the Capitol last week, and then some of them took action and committed an insurrection. And so I think the president's own words have doomed him.
Moving on now, as Congress and law enforcement officials beef up security today and in preparation for the inauguration of Joe Biden in exactly 1 week, we thought we would look at the security arrangements that were in place the day the Capitol was assaulted last week. What did officials expect, and why was the National Guard not in a position to respond? Nick Schifrin looks at what happened on January 6th, minute by minute.
January 6th dawned with a fateful decision already made. D.C. National Guardsmen deployed to intersections and metro stops, but the city and military agreed there would only be 340, all unarmed. Federal authorities, including the Capitol Police, declined Guard help. The assumption was they wouldn't be needed.
Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass.
At 9:13 a.m., President Trump's supporters began to speak and fill the ellipse in the shadow of the White House.
Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy.
12:15 p.m., President Trump departs from his teleprompter and urges the crowd to fight.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
We take your food. You back the off.
38 minutes later, and a mile and a half away, as President Trump continued speaking, his supporters arrived at the edge of the Capitol and fought with Capitol Police. 30 seconds later, they were through. Thousands approached the Capitol's base and more Capitol Police. The two sides faced off. By 1:15, they clashed on the Capitol steps. That's almost exactly when President Trump concluded his speech, once again urging supporters to the Capitol.
So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I want to thank you all. God bless you, and God bless America.
President Trump drove back to the White House as his supporters streamed by the thousands east to the Capitol. That's when, at 1:30 p.m., D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser called Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy and requested an additional few hundred guardsmen who'd already been put on 12-hour recall. McCarthy agreed.
They broke through. It's on.
But by then, it was too late. 2 p.m.
They're getting into the Capitol tonight.
Rioters violently broke into the Capitol itself. 2:20 p.m., Capitol Police struggled to hold their ground. At that exact moment, Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sun called D.C. National Guard Commander General William Walker and Army Secretary McCarthy. Sun pleaded for as many National Guardsmen as possible, the same guardsmen he said he'd been blocked from requesting days before. The Army says McCarthy ran to Acting Defense Secretary Chris Miller for approval. It was granted at 3 p.m. But the D.C. National Guard needed to call in the rest of its guardsmen, and the Guard who'd already deployed needed to go back to the D.C. Armory to pick up riot shields and get briefed on a new, more confrontational mission. There was no cavalry on instant standby. Meanwhile, the Capitol descended into violence. Members of Congress sheltered. Insurrectionists fought police. As lawmakers hid, rioters sat in their seats. The Capitol had been overrun. Still, other states wanted to help. At 3:46 p.m., National Guard Bureau Commander General Daniel Hawkinson spoke with the head of the Virginia National Guard. At 4:40 p.m., McCarthy spoke with Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. The Pentagon says none of the Virginia or Maryland National Guard could arrive until the next day. But Hogan said the approval process took too long.
So we had multiple times. The general was, we running up the flagpole, we're ready. Don't have authorization. Don't have authorization. Can't tell you what was going on the other end on the decision-making process.
The D.C. National Guard falls under multiple jurisdictions, and military officials acknowledge its deployment is bureaucratic.
Thank you, Mayor Bowser.
At 4:50 p.m., after most of the damage was already done, Army Secretary McCarthy acknowledged deploying the D.C. Guard was not easy.
There was additional requests that came forward from the Capitol Police, and for us to truly understand the specifics behind their requests and how we would support the operations, a lot of questions were asked, a little bit of confusion.
Military officials believe local and federal authorities underestimated the potential for violence and should have asked for more help. But they also acknowledge they were stung by their association to June's violent clearing of Black Lives Matter protests. So before and after the election, they took pains to ensure the military had no role. And when law enforcement authorities did not request National Guard at a rally protesting the election results, the military was eager to comply. By 6:45 p.m., hundreds of National Guard soldiers had arrived outside the Capitol. As many as 20,000 of them could be in D.C. for next week's inauguration, when military and local officials say they are eager, instead of hesitant, for a show of force.